There we go. So welcome to the launch series. We're going to wait a moment as we get our guest to join us this morning. It's like the virtual version of people streaming into the room.
Interesting.
Typically we have some, live guests, and then we'll also have some guests that continue to visit this over the next week or two. It's always exciting to kind of watch kind of how this gets spread throughout the community. We actually had an alumni from over in Richmond send us a note saying that they wanted to get involved and that they've loved watching these in the launch series.
It's good for the kids to listen to others' careers, how they did it, so they can get ideas on something that would help them, with their future.
Well, let's jump in and let's get started. I know we'll have some people kind of streaming in as we go. So I'm here with Rafa Calderon joining us for the launch series here at FRA. I'm grateful, Rafa, for doing this. I really appreciate, Rafa, you taking the time. A little background on Rafa. He originally hails from Costa Rica, where his grandfather and his father were the president. He did not stay in the family business, but actually traveled out on his own, earned a bachelor's degree in business and economics from Boston University, where he also played soccer there. Went out into the business world, working for Siratech Corp at first, but then eventually went on to get his MBA at Harvard in 2002. He's in some ways a serial entrepreneur. He started his own company, founded the Design House LLC. But in that fact, he's also gone on to kind of invest in a number of other startups around the world in real estate development in Costa Rica, China, Israel, and the US. He's got his hands in just about everything. And I know he's been really busy during this time, kind of working on different things around the world. So I really appreciate you taking the time, Rafa, to do this for our community.
You're welcome.
So let's jump in and get started. So what was your first big move? What got you started on your way?
Well, Sean, I gave it a lot of thought, and I have to say that my first moves were in college. When I started college, I decided that I was going to have and build a very good rapport with my fellow faculty, with the faculty, and with the dean of the university. That helped me tremendously because they eventually, when I left college, were the ones who introduced me to so many connections that they had in the business world. I knew that I wanted to do business. And through their connections, I was interviewed by eventually the man who hired me, who was the CEO of Siratech Corporation. He was very involved in the school. So you got a lot of businessmen and a lot of people that, as well as FRA and in universities, are involved. So if you can have a good rapport, a good relationship with your faculty, with the dean of the university, they will help you find a good place that fits for you. This company, Siratech, was a wholesaler in multiple imported products from different places around the world. And immediately he became my mentor. And I became like a sponge. I started to learn as much as I could from him and those, around him. I never told him no. I did everything he asked me to do. It was like, I didn't want to stop learning. I was working 70 to 80 hours a week with him. And I would say that, on Sundays, it was funny. He would ask me to come at 6 a.m. to his house on a Sunday and bring his coffee, his bagels, and his newspaper. And he would give me work on Sundays, and then he would leave. But I think that, as I said, the first move for me was creating that relationship within the university that then allowed me to go out and be introduced by people who knew me to people in the business world.
That's neat. So that's how you kind of got on your way. But so what was your first big break?
Well, again, I think that I had, I divided it into three, okay? I had three big breaks in my life, okay? I think the first one, again, was being hired by this gentleman called Leonard Florence into the Sirate Corporation. I was hired in a company that fit me well. It was a very flexible and entrepreneur-oriented company. So I constantly rotated, within the organization. I was not put in one single place. I was the assistant to the CEO, so I was kind of like his utility player. And what helped me with the break there was that he was willing to teach me a little bit about every part of the business. I was in marketing, I did finance, I did sales, I did manufacturing, I did supply chain. I traveled the world to different places to buy companies. So I think that that was my first break, being able to enter a company that let me go into multiple areas, and I learned a little bit about everything. My second break was back after my MBA. I was able to, come back to the company, and they gave me my own division. So now I had the opportunity to run a company within the company. And I took the company from $15 million to about $75 million in 3 years. And, that gave me the opportunity to learn about the home decor business, make connections with factories, make connections with clients. I was able also to look at the big picture. After my MBA, I'm going to give this some advice to those listening. I worked 6 to 7 years before I went back to my MBA. And that was critical because that helped me to look at the big picture and not focus on narrow things. When we're young, we only look so far ahead, what's going to happen the next hour, the next day. I was able to look at the long-term picture. So the break there was, running my own division. And my third break was when I decided to establish my own business. I decided that it was time for me to go and do something on my own. And, I had learned about the business. I decided that it was time for me to open my own. And, for 1 year, I planned the exit of the company that I used to work for. And only when I had all my ducks in line, I went to the new CEO of the company because the old one had passed away. My mentor had passed away. And I told them, I said, somebody one day let you start your own business. I would appreciate if you give me that same courtesy and let me start my own. So those are my three big breaks, right? One, being hired by somebody who was my mentor, who let me basically taught me and let me learn about a little bit about everything in business. Second was letting me run my own business. And third, once I knew that I was ready, that I had learned enough that I could go on my own.
Well, obviously you clearly learned enough, so and have done pretty well. So how have you landed in your current role today? Obviously you started your own business, but you also have a bunch of these development opportunities around the world. What kind of landed you in kind of your current space?
Well, I would say that it was tremendous amount of planning and hard work and endless sleepless nights. Okay, because starting your own business is, I think, the hardest thing you could ever do. There's always going to be someone else out there trying to do better than you and wanting to work, harder than you, right? So I was very careful on when and how I was going to start my new business. The when was when I felt I had learned all about what was needed to do on my own. I also had saved enough money so that if it didn't work, I could fall back for a little bit until I found a new job. And also, I was still young enough that if I failed, I could go back and stand on my own feet, and the how I landed in the current role, I think that, is more of the planning. I feel like I planned my business, over a year before I started it. And I used something very simple. And I know people teach these, which is the KISS method, right? Keep it simple, stupid, right? You want to make sure that whatever business or whatever you do, keep it simple. The simpler you keep it, the easier it is for others to understand it and for others to also invest in it. So, that's sort of how I landed into the role that I am today, because with the success of my business, I was able to generate, enough income to be able to invest in other businesses and to be involving other businesses.
So you kind of shared a little bit of that, advice, but, what advice have you received along the way that still impacts you today?
So I wrote down, I wrote down 7 of them because they really have impacted me a lot. And I want to share them with you. The first advice that was given to me was by, again, my CEO, and I'll tell you the story. He said, spend as much time as you can with your family. They're the most important thing in your life. Time is the most valuable thing you have, and you should spend it with your family. My first boss retired when he was 72 years old. He was rich. He was a great businessman. He was an amazing philanthropist for those who needed it most. But at the age of 73, 1 year, Sean, after he retired, he had a stroke. And unfortunately, he left us too soon. And I would say 2 months before he passed away, him and I had built a phenomenal relationship. And he told me, Rafa, I accomplished everything I wanted to accomplish, but one thing, I did not spend enough time with my family. I didn't build the relationship that I would have wished with my children. So that taught me that, yes, you can be successful, have a lot of money, but if family is not first, nothing else matters. That was one of the lessons that I would like to give to those that are listening. Second, he said to me one day, he asked me that I should go get my MBA. And I told him, I don't want to. I was doing great, right? I was in the company, I was making good money, I was single, and going get my MBA meant that I would not make any money and be there 2 years. And he came back to me and said, Rafa, they can take everything away from you, but they can never take your education. Don't ever stop learning and growing as a person. So that's why I decided to go to my MBA, because of what he said to me that day. And then, I have my godfather who told me one day that he wanted me to come a weekend and spend with him. And he said to me, Rafa, I want you to map out your life. Okay. And again, remember, this was before I was thinking about a family. And he gave me a blank piece of paper and said, why don't you divide your life in thirds, a third, a third, and third, and think about what you want to do with it, right? And he helped me, and I would encourage those that are listening to, ask your grandparents and your parents to help you with this, which is, Sean, when he gave me that piece of paper, he gave me direction. And I decided that, again, without focusing on family right now, I said, my first third of my life, I'm going to dedicate in learning. I'm going to learn. I'm going to learn from people. I'm going to ask questions, and I'm going to learn. The second third of my life, I said, well, now with that knowledge, I'm going to make money. I'm going to do business, make money, and be successful. And the last third of my life, I'm going to give it all away, right? So I wrote that when I was 17 years old. And the only thing that obviously that's missing in that is family. And I talked about that first. But that was some really good advice that was given to me. Another thing that was very important was the vice president of manufacturing in the company. I was managing a factory in Puerto Rico, and he saw me one day get very angry to one of the employees because he had done something wrong. And he told me, Rafael, I'm going to give you a lesson. Don't ever lose your cool. Those who get angry lose the respect of others, and they will not follow you. So don't get angry, right? When you're a leader, you need to listen and don't get angry, okay? Another one is that was told to me is whatever you do, give it 100%. So no matter, whatever you're doing, you got to give it 100%. And then the last thing I would say, don't ever spend above your means. Make sure that you take that, and always spend only what you have.
Well, I know I asked for one, but I think that's a lot of good advice for people to listen and take away. I appreciate you being so thoughtful about that. what's something you look back on now and you wonder, why did I worry so much about it?
Okay, this is a good one for those junior and seniors and in the upper school. Unquestionably, the thing that I stressed the most was where I was going to go to college, right? And looking back at it now, it was so silly to worry about where I was going to go. Where you go to college is not as important as to what you do with your life after college, right? It is what you do after college that defines you. I think that, you should go to the college that best fits you, not the best ranked school. There's no need for that. It's whatever fits you, whatever makes you feel more comfortable. When I've hired thousands of people in my life, and I have never cared one bit what school they came from. College was never, their GPA, or that was never really for me the most important consideration at all. For me, it was basically, what have they done in any internship, in community work during the summer? Were they willing to work hard, go the extra mile without being asked? Were they self-motivated? Were they humble and honest? Were they engaging? Did they have a fun personality? So I would just say, don't worry about college, where you're going to go. Make sure it's a good fit. And again, it's what you do after college and what type of life you live and how you approach life that's going to define who you are. And people are going to see it that way.
That's some great advice. What lesson have you learned, that you'd like to share with the FRA community?
Sean, I'm never, me, I talk a lot. So it's never just one lesson, right? So I wrote down 8, and I'm sorry, but you know me very well. Number one, I would say find a mentor and learn as much as you can from them. It served me well. I had a mentor, actually several of them, my father, my godfather in business, he was Leonard Florence. So find a mentor and make sure that you give yourself, the opportunity to have somebody that can guide you. I would say another lesson is sacrifice. Prove to others that you are the best. I always say there's always somebody out there that is going to try to do it better than you. So be resourceful and again, work hard. I would say that, there's something that I lived through, which is that Luke 12:48. That I think you will relate to, which is, from everyone to whom much was given, much will be required, right? And from the one to whom much has been entrusted, even more will be demanded. So those, in life, if you are one of those persons, you need to give back, and a lot will be required from you. I would say that another thing that has helped me tremendously, and I was talking to Betsy about this, when we first started on the lunch webinar talk, was that you must keep in touch with people. My connections in life have brought me many things. And the way that I've been able to do that is by having personal connections. Send handwritten notes to people. Don't text people, don't email them. When you meet somebody that is interesting, I would say, write a thank you note, send it by mail. Make sure that they know that you appreciate their help or the time that they spend talking to you. Help others no matter what position they're in. In my business, you have people that are assistant buyers. And those assistant buyers one day will be buyers. And those buyers one day may be running the company. So always, no matter what, you help people. You never know where they're going to land or what position they're going to be. Never expect anything back in return. Make sure that you know that. And the last thing I would say, I always maintain, we used to call it a Rolodex back in the days, right, Sean? Now it's your phone where you keep all your information. I would say that when you meet somebody, ask for their contact information and keep on the notes what you talked about. What was their interest? What were they involved? It will serve you well to have those contacts. Another thing is, when talking to people, make sure you look at them in the eye and you engage. I think that a lot of, young people have lost the ability to communicate, to talk face to face. We text a lot. communicating face to face is very important. It's the way you engage, with people. You have to make them feel important. Don't ever feel entitled. We have this Generation X of people that feel entitled. Never feel entitled. And the last thing is that in order to succeed in life, you will fail. You will fail. Okay. And I always tell my people, it's okay to fail. Just don't do the same mistake again.
That's some great advice. Don't get beat on the same thing twice. What about, obviously we're in this world of social distancing right now. In your industries, in your world, and obviously you do business all over the world, what are you tackling right now?
Okay, so, as you described, there are two main businesses that I have, and I'm going to describe them. One is called Driftwood Acquisition Development, which is a vertically integrated hotel conglomerate that manages, acquires, and develops hotels. So that's one business. So we call it the hotel business, okay? And the other one is called the Design House. And there we design, source, manufacture, and distribute home decor product, things that people put in their homes, to large retailers in the US. Both of those businesses got hit very hard. We're talking about cancellations of orders. We're talking about nobody in our hotels. We went from having a 78% occupancy rate to a 6% occupancy rate around our hotels. So it was a very, I would say, stressful time, but the way we approached it was rapid and bold. We were very bold with the approaches that we did to ensure the survival on this unprecedented time. So I would say the number one thing we did was we put more amount of hours than we normally do, and we did it quick. For example, the first thing we needed to do, it was make sure that both businesses had sufficient cash on hand for the worst case scenario. So we planned long-term, okay, to make sure that all these businesses had cash. Cash is king, right? You guys have heard this many, many times. For example, in the hotel business, unfortunately, we had to cut our staff to the bare minimum and apply for government programs, but we did it early before they unfortunately run out. On the import business, we had to ask our factories for terms, and then we, and delay shipments. So a lot of it was rapid action, but a lot of communication, a lot of phone calls, a lot of Zoom, a lot of, as I said, relationships that you built over the years that you can utilize. We also call and communicated with all of our strategic partners. Again, in the hotel business, we called our lenders, which we have built a good rapport and relationship, and tried to renegotiate the terms of the loans of each hotel, and then we called our investors and said, hey, we may need a capital call from you. And I'm going to tell you, you're not going to get any dividends this year. There's no profits from that hotel this year. And on the importing business side, we communicated with the retailers and said, look, we don't want you to cancel our orders. We'll give you a discount. We'd rather take a discount and delay of shipments than cancellation. So it was a very, again, we were trying to do a proactive approach. And finally, we wanted to think outside the box, Sean, and that was very important. What else in your organization could be used during this time? In the hotel business, what we said was, okay, people won't come to our hotels, but what about the National Guard? The National Guard needs a place to stay. So we talked to governments, and we have 5 of our hotels where National Guard is staying. So we got some contracts from the government on National Guard people staying in the hotels. The other thing was converting hotels for, first responders. So a lot of our hotels are now occupied by first responders. In the platform of my import business, PPE was something that was required in the United States. I had a platform in China with offices and manufacturing that I could get to people that were producing PPE. So we were able to bring in millions of masks to the state of New York and the state of Florida. And so I was able to utilize the platform that I had, okay, for new opportunities.
Wow. I'm guessing you've been pretty busy, to say the least.
I have.
So I have one more question for you, and then I'll open up to see if there's any questions online. Sometimes we get them online, sometimes I get them by text. But before I do that for questions, What have you learned about yourself, in the midst of kind of working in this remote environment? And, from this, what things would you hold on to and what things you're like, man, I can't wait to move on from this?
Well, I think that as a society, I've learned that we can adapt to challenging situations, and that this has demonstrated that some of us can do work remotely, right? We adapt. I do want to clarify that there are millions of people around the world that do not have the ability to do what has presented to me and my family, but I've been able to adapt and work remotely. Why? It has given me flexibility, lack of commute, which is great. We've helped the environment that way. It has increased my productivity. By not having to travel, believe it or not, it's incredible that how much my productivity has increased. I also think that this has helped me to get closer to my family, something that I'm sure everybody's experiencing right now, which is now I get to spend so much time with my kids and my wife, because I'm not traveling or going to different places. And I've been able to connect more actually with people than before. Now it's been virtual and it's not ideal, but I've now been able to connect with people that are at home and staying put more than ever. And I would say, you asked me, what will I keep doing after social distancing is over? I think that, first, I don't think social distancing is going to be over anytime soon. I think, unfortunately, we're seeing that it's going to be in the next 2 to 3 years that this is going to continue, in my opinion. But as much as I feel that personal interaction is essential in our lives, I think I'll be doing many of my international and domestic meetings via Zoom. I think there is a lot that I've learned that I don't have to go to every place. I don't have to travel everywhere. That there are things that we can do now virtually that are not needed to go personal. And that's going to save me time and be able to have more time with my family.
Oh, that's neat. That's neat to hear. Well, I have a question for you.
Sure.
That's come online. As an entrepreneur starting out, how do you decide when to keep following an idea or when to just move on?
I would say that in my business, it took a year to see profits, come through. And I think you gotta be able to recognize when things are not working out, and you just close it and move on to the next one. And I would say that a year is something. A year would be a good amount of time to figure out if your business is working or not.
Interesting, Nate. So this is a more personal question. Growing up, the son and the grandson, what's it like to grow up the son or the grandson of such a public figure?
It was amazing. As the son of an ex-president, I would say that I had a great life. We were exposed to so many wonderful opportunities from meeting Fidel Castro. I know he's a tyrant, but it was great to meet him, to be able to, spend time in the Oval Office with George Bush, to be able to, go to presidential summits and meet all of these great leaders around the world. I think that to me, the experiences that my parents exposed me and my siblings was what I guess made me outgoing, made me somebody that understood a little bit more about the world. We also learned a lot about the communities in our country and saw how poverty exists everywhere in the world and how we must help it. So it was a mixed feelings, right? So one day you're in a, we call them, I don't know in the United States, but in Latin countries, we have communities of people that don't have homes and they live in made homes, right? Like homeless or people that don't have much. We would used to visit those communities and see how you could help them. But at the same time, then you would travel overseas and meet these wonderful people that had influenced the world. So to me, it was an amazing experience. The only crappy thing is when people, like the media follows you, or when you're in the eye of everybody and everybody's making sure that you don't want to screw up or or do too bad for your family. Especially I carry the same name as my father and my grandfather. So when I left Costa Rica and I came to the U.S., I think I was looking for some being anonymous, I guess, because in Costa Rica I couldn't be.
I can't even imagine. It's actually fun to watch you, hear you talk about it, but I can't even imagine. Well, Rafa, I really appreciate you taking the time to do this for our community and for our students and our families and our alumni body. You know, this is our last live launch series. You know, how did I get started? Where do we go from here? Zoomcast of the school year. It's been a remarkable year. It's been really challenging, but this is something that's new, was born out of this current environment, and something we look forward to continuing next year for our community as a way to continue to innovate and kind of help educate our kids in different formats. So I appreciate you taking the time to be a part of it.
You're welcome.
Well, listen, have a great weekend. Thanks a lot. Take care.
You too.